Okay, diff mount part 4. This was the final section to mount the diff. I had a friend come over to help, which actually ended up doing the trick. First, we loosened the bottom 2 bolts of the diff to just give us a little bit more wiggle room. It's not clear that that did much since it seems like once the bolts are sort of threaded through into the diff, I mean that those threads are sort of rigid, and so I don't know how much flexibility we got from that. But nevertheless, we loosened the bottom 2 bolts. Um, and from the last session, I couldn't drive the top bolt back out. I think the weight of the diff was just pushing it against, the chassis, and I couldn't push it back out. But with my friend here, he sort of jiggled the diff as I hammered the bolt back out, and it ended up popping back out. So we took it out, inspected it. It looked fine. Um, I re-greased it, and we were trying to insert it back in while he sort of jiggled the diff to sort of get the holes to align. We got it in pretty easily this time into the diff. I sort of hammered it. It went all the way through, and we hit the same thing as last time. The diff hole and the chassis hole were still misaligned. This time it was still about the same position where it was sort of like a couple millimeters too high on the diff side. So we spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out how we can lever the diff down. We ended up using some pliers and sort of just pushing against the top of the diff uh, to lever it down. So what ended up happening was one of us would lever it down and the other one would hammer the other side. We got it to a position where it looked like the bolt should come through, but it still wasn't coming through. I think it was just like maybe a half millimeter or a fraction of a millimeter sort of still catching on the chassis hole, the bushing. So we kept hitting it and ended up popping the bushing out. Um, but this actually ended up letting us install it maybe a little bit easier. So we hammered the bolt all the way through. Now that the bushing was out, we had no resistance. And then once that was done, we packed the washers back in. We sort of knew the correct amount, so we packed the washers back in onto the bolt, and then we sort of just put the bushing over the bolt again. And the tricky thing was we levered the diff downwards again until sort of the bushing was in the right spot to be able to get hit back into the chassis hole. We took a hammer swing and it went in. And so then the rest of it was just sort of bumping the bushing back in bit by bit. And then we ended up tightening all 3 of the diff bolts after that, torqued them all to spec. The top one is only 61 Newton meters and the bottom 2 are 81. And then that was it. The diff was in. And then the rest of the session, my friend helped me make the air intake gasket a little bit neater. And then we also checked why the air box wasn't fully sealing around the sides. It was showing, if you remember, it was showing sort of the orange rubber gasket of the air filter. Um, my other friend who built his Caterham sent me his measurements of his airbox. It looks exactly the same as mine, so it's not really clear why mine is showing the orange gasket. But we just left it like that, and that was the rest of the session. Pretty satisfying today.